Dear fans of face-slapping stories with satisfying endings, don't swipe away just yet. This is a face-slapping story with 10,086 likes. Commenters have reported losing 20 pounds after reading this. If you like it, make sure to like and follow. That way, you'll see even more completed stories like this one. On my first day after reincarnating as the Villainess in a school drama, I skillfully slapped the heroine twice on the stage. Sorry about that. I bullied my half-sister. I guess I'm just living up to the villainous role. Anyway, what's one more debt when you're already drowning in them? After all, patience has never been my style. Alright, let's get started, everyone. At this moment, we're at Wenchuan High School's monthly assembly. A huge crowd of students sits below the flag-raising platform. Those who need to reflect and those being praised are all standing on the stage. But only two of us are up here. One is me, and the other is Soo Jir. Last week, Soo Yukin, a senior student from Class 1, was caught verbally bullying her classmate Soo Jia in the hallway. The school director caught her in the act, and due to the severity of the incident, she is being publicly reprimanded. She is required to reflect on her actions. As the teacher reads my name, she doesn't even bother hiding her contempt. I stand on stage expressionless, taking the microphone from the teacher. I say, last week, I verbally bullied my classmate Soo Jia, and I couldn't be more thrilled about it. Of course, I hope he remembers what I said. I hope it leaves a lasting impression. The crowd erupts beneath me. The teacher's face turns pale in an instant. I looked at their reactions with a smug expression. This is just the beginning. The heroine, Soo Jia, who had been standing behind me and smiling confidently, was now filled with terror. I suddenly turned and walked towards her. She instinctively took a few steps back. But it was too late. Clap, I patted my slightly heated palm, looking at the heroine who had been slapped to the ground. Her face now adorned with two distinct handprints. I couldn't help but smile, though sorry, for bullying my half-sister again. Am I really reflecting on this? For this illegitimate daughter who dares to intrude, I'd slap her a few more times if needed. My smile grew wider. The sound of my hunger echoed through the microphone, reaching the ears of every student sitting below. The teacher on stage, seeing what happened, quickly rushed over and snatched the microphone from my hand, afraid I might say something even more shocking. I casually walked off the stage, leaving in front of everyone without a care in the world. I left a huge mess behind, and a crowd of students eating up the drama. Anyway, the heroine's commendation today is as good as gone. If I remember correctly, in the original story, today was the day the villainess publicly read her reflection letter. She admitted to bullying and misbehavior. The villainess was harshly criticized, while the heroine, who was always seen as a model student, stood in sharp contrast. From that point on, the villainess's high school life was spent in isolation from her classmates, no matter what she did. In the eyes of others, everything I did was tied to bullying the heroine, even though the original character wasn't actually wrong. Was it wrong to warn Soo Jia, the illegitimate daughter, to stay away from my fiancé? Was it wrong to tell her not to casually enter my house? No, it wasn't wrong at all. The only mistake the original character made was not being ruthless enough towards her. As the villainess, she wasn't cruel enough. That's the real taboo. I walked towards the school gate, following my memories. I pulled out my phone and called the family driver, telling him to pick me up at the school gate immediately. When I reached the gate, the security guard walked over with a serious expression, blocking my way. Students aren't allowed to leave during class hours, since he wasn't being hostile. I didn't want to make things difficult for him. I blinked a few times and said, "Uncle, my father just passed away. I need to go home." The sound of a midnight cigarette, paired with my teary, bloodshot eyes. My acting was flawless. The security guard awkwardly withdrew his outstretched hand, his face showing sympathy. He sighed a few times and patted my back. "Your father Wouldn't want to see you so heartbroken. Hurry on your way. Even after I walked out of the gate, the security guard was still looking at me with sympathy. I stepped outside, but the driver was still on his way. He'd probably take another 20 minutes to arrive. I glanced at the rows of shops near the gate and immediately spotted a dessert shop. There were only a few scattered customers inside. I ordered an ice cream and found an inconspicuous corner to sit down in. I love sweets. It's a habit I've had since my previous life, especially when I'm happy. I always reward myself with a tub of ice cream. Spoonful after spoonful, I dug into my ice cream. The satisfaction of slapping someone was quite something, and the slaps were impressively symmetrical too. Just as I closed my eyes to enjoy the delicious ice cream, a clear, crisp voice of a young boy echoed near me. I opened my eyes and looked up. A boy in a school uniform stood in front of me. With fair skin, delicate features, and perfect proportions that even made the school uniform look stylish. I twirled the spoon in my hand, uncertain as I looked at him. Are you talking to me? Who else? His black eyes were cool and calm. I turned away indifferently. I don't know you. Hearing this, his body stiffened, and even his attempt to sit down paused awkwardly. Just then, my phone rang. It was the driver. I stood up and left. He looked at me as if wanting to say something but hesitated. I had no time to bother with him. Play guessing games if you want. As soon as I stepped through the door at home, I hadn't even finished taking off my shoes when my father started shouting at me. You disrespect your classmates at school, and even aired our family's dirty laundry in public. What are you trying to do? You disgrace. I remained calm, feeling little emotion. After all, I had already predicted this outcome. I placed my shoes neatly, then lazily lifted my gaze to look at my biological father. He was an aging man who still carried a certain scholarly elegance. No wonder he once enchanted the original character's mother so completely. She was willing to sever ties with her parents just to marry him. But in the end, she entrusted her life to the wrong person. Even before her death, she never knew that while she was pregnant, he had already found a mistress outside and fathered a daughter just a few days younger than his legitimate child. I walked past my father toward the sofa, lightly tossing out a retort. Or what? Let the illegitimate daughter step on me? My father, who had been raging, suddenly fell silent. What illegitimate daughter? She's your sister. Your family. He continued, I'm planning to bring her home to live with us in a few days. Do you really want to make this house a battleground? Listening to him, it seemed like everything was my fault. Sister? I don't make a habit of randomly accepting sisters. You shouldn't either, father. Besides, whether this villa remains peaceful or not, I highly doubt Sujia will be the one causing trouble. If my grandparents have anything to say, they'll be the ones to punish me. So you don't need to be so worked up, father. My tone was cold, each word piercing. My father's family, the Su family, isn't some prestigious clan. Whatever status he has today is entirely thanks to my mother's wealthy family. His business has long been struggling for years now. He's been relying on dividends from my shares in the Fuji Group to keep things afloat. Even this villa we're living in is a property registered under my name. You ungrateful child. Do you really think as your father, I have no right to scold you? He was furious, his temple veins bulging as his anger flared. Well, in that case, I guess I should make a call to inform Mr. Fu. And Zhang, who was arranged by my grandfather to take care of me, always said that I'm the only heir of the Fu family, and I must not be ruined by my father. In simple terms, if anyone's going to hit me, it's definitely not him. Father should really calm down. I'll head back to rest now. Teaching a lesson is exhausting. I waved off his rage. My competitive father heard my cool, emotionless voice. But even speaking one more word to someone like him felt tiring. Later, according to Aunt Zhang, after I left, father received a call, likely from Soo-ji. All the anger he had with no outlet was unleashed on her instead, although I hadn't expected it. This turn of events was something I quite enjoyed. The next day, I entered school as usual. However, all along the way, I felt strange gazes following me. Wenjuan High School has always been an elite institution, with students from only the wealthiest and most influential families. Someone like me, publicly tied to an illegitimate child scandal, was the first of its kind. I was the talk of the town. The moment I stepped into the classroom, all eyes focused on me. Well, someone still has the nerve to show up for class. If it were me, I would have already applied to drop out. Two students sitting in the corner spoke mockingly as soon as I walked in, but without any support from others. Their words hung awkwardly in the air. I glanced over coldly. They were the lapdogs of Soo-ji, the so-called fools in love. I smiled indeed. How does Soo-ji still have the nerve to show up? Why don't you two go and pass on the message? They clearly didn't expect me to say that, and were left speechless, awkwardly retorting, "Who are you talking about? If you have no brain, stop barking out loud," I said, finding them incredibly annoying. As soon as the words left my mouth, the entire class burst into laughter. Some of the onlookers, who loved drama, yelled out, "Li fei chen liang." The person being talked about isn't even speaking. So what are you yapping on about? Exactly. More voices chimed in agreement. Soo-ji, who had initially remained silent, had no choice but to step forward now, her tear-filled eyes slightly red. Looking innocent and harmless. "You can, if you're angry, direct it at me. Don't involve innocent people," she said softly. The two lapdogs gazed at her with admiration, and I seriously wondered how their brains even worked. There had to be something wrong with them. I sighed, but since the heroine had spoken, I could only comply out of respect. I raised my arm high, and then swiftly brought it down. Asterisk smack, asterisk, another pair of crisp slabs landed, perfectly aligned with the marks from yesterday, not a millimeter off. "There, I've taken my anger out on you. Now can you quietly return to your seat?" Soo-ji's eyes widened as she covered her face. Everyone else was equally stunned. Is that really what she meant? Even those who had been planning to speak up for Soo-ji shut their mouths at this point. When it came to real confrontation, they didn't dare get involved. Who knew what kind of consequences it might bring to their families? As for Soo-ji, she seemed utterly incapable of understanding what just happened. She stayed by my side, tears falling steadily. "If it can calm you down, sister, I'll do anything you ask." "Is that so?" I let out a cold laugh. Then, as if about to raise my hand again, but before I even fully lifted it, she, filled with fear, ran toward my fiancé, crying in his arms like a delicate flower in the rain. After yesterday's commotion, everyone knew by now that Soo-ji was my half-sister, and in front of so many people, of all places, she chose to hide in the arms of my fiancé, the one arranged through a business marriage contract. Her intentions were as clear as day. Everyone could see it. The girls in the class looked at Soo-ji with knowing disdain, casting contemptuous glances in her direction. But alas, my aloof, reserved, and prideful fiancé seemed to fall for her tear-streaked act. "You can let it go, don't push too far," Gu Jingyu warned, his eyes flashing a cautionary glance at me. Some of my close friends, who couldn't stand it any longer, slammed their hands on their desks and pointed at Gu Jingyu. "Don't you know who your real fiancé is? Has your brain been kicked by a donkey? You really don't know why Yukin likes you? If it were me, I would have dumped you ages ago." These were words I couldn't say directly because of family matters, but hearing my friends speak up for me, it was perfect timing. "Let me tell you something," one of them continued. "I've been fed up with you for a long time. What's so special about that green tea anyway? You guys are all so bewitched by her." One after another jumping to defend her. "If you go home and your mother finds out, you'd get slapped twice, just like that." I glanced at my friend, who was still going off. Not showing any signs of slowing down, I handed her a drink, saying, "Take a break, you'll get thirsty." Gu Jingyu, never having been scolded like this in his life, stood there with a face as frosty as salted ice. An uncontrollable fury flashed through his eyes. He looked at me and asked, "Is that how you feel too?" I shrugged and waved my hand. "Of course," I replied calmly, meeting his gaze. "Naturally, I hope you take this time to seriously think about who your real fiancé is. Once you figure it out, let me know." Gu Jingyu stood there, stunned. I didn't bother with him any further, but instead confidently walked to the front of the classroom. "Let me say this once, for everyone to hear," I began. "If anyone tries to advise me, or plead for someone's case, feel free to back off right now. Otherwise," I paused, "I might just help you out by finding a few illegitimate daughters, or sons, to send back to your homes as well." I know what Wu Zhuan said may have offended some people today, so I'll apologize on her behalf. But I raised my voice and cast a sharp glance at Sujia and Gu Jingyu. "She's under my protection. If anyone dares to cause trouble for her, they'll have to deal with me." Wu Zhuan, the friend who had just stood up for me, was the kind of person who clicked well with me, especially considering my role as the villainess. Ever since last time, the heroine Sujia had been much more restrained. For the past week, she hadn't pulled any more stunts in front of me. It was Friday afternoon, and I was enjoying a rare relaxing day out at the mall with Wu Zhuan. I had plans to visit my grandparents tomorrow, those two lively treasures of mine. But halfway through our shopping, I got a call from Aunt Zhang at home. "Miss, something's happened. You need to come back right away." Aunt Zhang's voice was both urgent and angry on the phone. I put down the bracelet I had just picked out. "What happened, Aunt Zhang?" "Take your time and explain. It's your father. He brought that Sujia girl to the house with luggage in hand." I was a bit surprised. Their silence lately had led me to believe they had abandoned the idea. I didn't expect them to pull such a move behind my back now. "Aunt Zhang, don't worry about it. Just wait for me at home." Hearing that, Aunt Zhang understood I had things under control. Still, before hanging up, she reminded me several times not to be upset, but there was no need for Aunt Zhang to worry. Feeling sad over my scumbag father? I'd rather spend more money buying happiness. Wu Zhuan, overhearing the call, stomped her foot in anger. How can people be so shameless? Compared to her, I was much calmer. After all, instead of letting myself feel unhappy, I'd rather make the ones messing with me feel miserable. "Don't get worked up, Wu Zhuan. I'll treat you to some ice cream. Forget about those annoying things. Ice cream makes people happy." I raised an eyebrow at her playfully. I threw my arm around Wu Zhuan's shoulder and pulled her towards the dessert shop. Little did I expect to run into some familiar faces inside. It was the boy I had met at the dessert shop near the school gate that day, and my so-called fiancé, Gu Jingyu. It wasn't that I was overly focused on them, but the two of them stood out like a sore thumb in the shop. Two tall, handsome guys, both over 6 feet, just sitting there. It was hard not to notice them. The intense, competitive looks they exchanged piqued my curiosity. Wu Zhuan followed my gaze. "Isn't that the new transfer student?" she asked. "What's he doing butting heads with Gu Jingyu?" That transfer student was the one everyone's been talking about recently. The one the school recruited with a hefty price. Chen Shengei, who, since his arrival, has been at odds with Gu Jingyu. "Interesting," I muttered as I grabbed my ice cream and sat down with Wu Zhuan in the best spot to watch the drama unfold. We couldn't hear their conversation, but watching Gu Jingyu get visibly irritated by Chen Shengei was oddly satisfying. But good times never last long. It seemed like their conversation had completely fallen apart. Gu Jingyu stormed out, leaving Chen Shengei sitting there alone. As Chen Shengei got up to leave, he shot a meaningful glance in our direction, but that moment passed quickly, and I decided to let it go for now. Instead of dwelling on it, it was better to wait for them to make the first move. I timed my return home perfectly, spotting my father waiting at the gate from a distance. My father was entangled in a conversation with several police officers in uniform. Meanwhile, Soo-jia stood nearby, her face flushed red, head bowed in utter embarrassment. She looked utterly humiliated. A few of the neighbors' servants peeked out in twos and threes, curious about the situation. I could understand them. After all, gossip was what made their chores more bearable. Soo-jia is my daughter, my father argued. How can this be considered trespassing? This report was filed by the homeowner. One officer explained, "Mr. Soo, you're making this difficult for us." Father still wanted to argue with the police. But Soo-jia suddenly spotted me sitting in the car, and in a surprised tone, called out, "Sister." That one word, sister, successfully captured everyone's attention. Realizing I couldn't continue just watching the show, I reluctantly got out of the car. "You can hurry and explain to the officers," my father said in a stern voice, obviously displeased with my decision to call the police. "This is your sister," he added as if scolding me. Soo-jia, intimidated by the sharp look in my eyes, didn't dare approach me and instead hid behind my father, sobbing quietly. Ignoring my father's words, I calmly walked over to the police officers and succinctly expressed my point of view. "Hello, I'm the one who called the police. This house is under my name." Soo-jia moved in without my permission. "Please have her removed from the property." Handling this through the police was far more efficient than dealing with it on my own. And most importantly, it brought embarrassment to the other party. Why not enjoy that? Upon hearing my words, the police officers looked troubled, turning their gaze toward my father, who was shielding Soo-jia. My father, Soo Xingjian, yelled angrily, "What are you saying? Do you even see me as your father anymore? She's your sister. How long do you plan to be this unreasonable?" I turned to look at him calmly. Before, I held back, at least acknowledging him as my father. So I didn't completely sever ties. But now, that hesitation was gone. My expression remained steady. "Father, I won't make things difficult for you." At those words, my father let out a sigh of relief. But he had relaxed far too soon. "If you're so eager to live with Soo-jia, I won't stand in your way. And Jong, please pack up my father's things. Father and Soo-jia can leave together." And Jong responded with even more urgency than usual. Moving swiftly to carry out the task, Father was left dumbfounded, staring at me in disbelief. "I'm your father," he exclaimed. "And you're Soo-jia's father too." With that one simple statement, he was rendered speechless. This whole farce ended with my father and Soo-jia moving out of the house. I watched as Soo-jia walked away, smugly satisfied with herself, and I couldn't help but smirk. She truly believed that by taking my father and Gu Jingyu, she had one over me. How laughable and foolish. The real drama was yet to come. That evening, I received a screenshot from Wu Zhuan of Soo-jia's latest social media post. In the photo, Soo-jia was smiling mischievously, leaning on Soo Xingjian's shoulder, posing as though they were the picture of a happy father-daughter duo. The interior of the house in the photo was exactly as I had imagined it would be. The last bit of worrying I had finally eased. It's good that they're in that house. Otherwise, my plan would have been harder to execute. When my grandfather heard about what I'd done, he couldn't stop praising me, saying I handled things with a sense of class. According to him, one must always have a set of principles when dealing with things, and not be swayed by unnecessary emotions. Grandmother, on the other hand, was so happy that she prepared a feast, celebrating my freedom from my scumbag father. This made me realize, once again, just how deep my grandparents' dislike for Soo Xingjian went. I spent the next few days living at the Fu residence, listening to my grandfather share stories about the business world, and helping my grandmother tend to the flowers in the backyard. The days passed peacefully and with purpose. As for Soo-jia, she continued to flaunt the luxury gifts my father had given her. On social media from time to time, I treated it like a joke. In fact, I shared it with my grandmother after dinner, and we even made bets on when those luxury items would slip right through her fingers. The weekend flew by, and as a senior in high school, most of my time had to be spent back at school. At school, Soo-jia was still the same as always, clinging to Gu Jingyu at every opportunity. She flaunted a new dress he had just bought her over the weekend, pretending to ask innocent questions to draw his attention. But this time, Gu Jingyu acted differently. In front of Soo-jia, who usually played the part of the gentle and pure girl, he kept his distance more than ever. He even made an effort to talk to me a few times, but I calmly and subtly avoided him. Wu Zhuan whispered in my ear as if she had seen a ghost. Has Gu Jingyu lost his mind? I just smiled in response. Who knows? Maybe he was impressed by your bold words last time, I teased. Wu Zhuan's eyes widened in excitement, her voice brimming with enthusiasm. Really? Really? If that's true, I'll scold him even more next time. Seeing her excitement, I wisely chose not to dampen her spirits. The truth was, Gu Jingyu hadn't lost his mind, nor was he suddenly enlightened by the scolding. It was his sense of crisis. He couldn't afford to treat me the same way he used to. During my stay at the Fu residence, I overheard my grandmother mentioning his family's situation more than once. Apparently, his father had brought home another son from outside the family. Normally, an outsider wouldn't stand a chance against a child raised and groomed by a prestigious family. But surprisingly, this new son had displayed talents, manners, and knowledge that rivaled Gu Jingyu's. With his status becoming shaky, Gu Jingyu's position was in jeopardy. So now, he was trying to cling to me like a lifeline. As the sole heir to the Fuji group, a marriage alliance with me would be his only chance to secure his position. However, he was torn between his desire for Soo-jia, the heroine, and his unwillingness to let go of me, the Fuji group's heir. I understood this well. Gu Jingyu's recent change in behavior was no surprise to me. But what I hadn't expected was that this matter, which involved just the two of us, would suddenly become a tangled web involving a third person. One day after lunch, Gu Jingyu approached me, holding two cups of milk tea. I know you like sweets, he said, holding out the milk tea. I bought this for you and Wu Zhuan. Before I could react, Wu Zhuan, noticing Soo-jia following closely behind Gu Jingyu, quickly interjected with a cold refusal. I don't want it. Then she turned to me and added, you're not allowed to accept it either. At Wu Zhuan's words, a fleeting glint of something passed through Soo-jia's eyes. She stopped drinking her own milk tea and immediately, in her usual sickly sweet tone, began defending Gu Jingyu. This is just a kind gesture from Jingyu. He bought it specially for you too. The previously lively classroom fell silent in an instant. Gu Jingyu, who had always been treated as a golden boy, wasn't used to being refused. Already irritated by the initial rejection, he became even more annoyed after hearing Soo-jia's words. His face darkened. Soo-yukin, are you going to drink this or not? He placed the milk tea right in front of me. Meanwhile, Soo-jia was fanning the flames on the side. Sister Yukin, you're definitely going to drink it. Right, she said, her tone teasingly sweet. Honestly, if Soo-jia weren't so smugly sipping her own milk tea, I might have played along out of politeness. Since Gu Jingyu and I were technically engaged, it wouldn't be wise to make the relationship too tense. But right now, seeing Gu Jingyu made me even more irritated. The way he allowed Soo-jia to flaunt herself in front of me was just too much. I had no intention of giving him any face. I sighed, standing up from my seat to look Gu Jingyu in the eye. I reached out, pretending to take the milk tea from his hand. Gu Jingyu's expression softened slightly as I did so. Behind me, Soo-jia was wearing a smug, triumphant smile. But before I could take the drink, a mocking voice rang out at the classroom door, laced with a subtle but undeniable pressure. Startled, I quickly withdrew my hand. He's not drinking it. Everyone, including me, turned to look in the direction of the voice. There stood Chen Xinge, holding a bag of takeout ice cream, striding confidently into the classroom. It's the transfer student. Chen Xinge, why is he in our class? Wow, he's so handsome. A wave of murmurs rose from around me. Gu Jingyu's face turned ashen at the sight of Chen Xinge. He gripped the milk tea bag in his hand even tighter. Chen Xinge ignored him completely, pushing past Gu Jingyu, and with a casual smile, offered the ice cream directly to me. "Suyukin, here's some ice cream for you." His tone was straightforward and brimming with youthful energy. I couldn't help but examine him closely. In my memory, Chen Shingei and I weren't close at all. This sudden act of kindness seemed too suspicious to trust. There had to be a hidden motive behind it. Wu Zhuan glanced at the 2 cups of milk tea, then at the ice cream, and finally at me with a puzzled expression. "She's my fiancée," Gu Jingyu snapped, glaring furiously at Chen Shingei, grabbing him by the collar. It was a clear warning, but Chen Shingei only smiled. That might not be the case for long. Unable to contain his rage, Gu Jingyu threw a punch. Chen Shingei quickly reacted, meeting Gu Jingyu's punch head-on without hesitation, their fists clashing hard. The nearby tables and chairs were knocked over as the two fought. The proud noble prince and the top-performing transfer student were brawling, leaving everyone watching gasping in shock. I didn't interfere, but instead calmly pulled Wu Zhuan to a safer spot. When the two were finally pulled apart, both had blood on their faces. Gu Jingyu, ever cautious, looked slightly rattled. I felt a bit exasperated. The situation could have been easily resolved by simply throwing the milk tea into the trash, but because of him, it had escalated into this messy confrontation. The heroine, clearly frightened, approached Gu Jingyu, her eyes brimming with tears. But instead of confronting the one who hit him, she aimed her words at me. "Suyin, how could you do this? Why would you bring an outsider to bully brother Jingyu?" She cried and accused me dramatically. What a performance! She really knew how to play the victim, even now trying to throw dirt on me. Do you even know what real bullying is? As soon as I finished speaking, I grabbed a book and threw it directly at her. It hit her squarely on the forehead. That felt satisfying. Gu Jingyu tried to step in to shield Su Jie, but he reacted a bit too late. Since he was so eager to defend her, I made sure the book found its way to him too. It seemed I wasn't just good at slapping. My aim with books wasn't bad either. Chen Shingei, with his bruised face, still had the nerve to joke about the situation. I couldn't help but speak coldly. "You're crazy." Provoking someone like this, hurting yourself to incite them, is hardly a smart move. As expected, both of them were soon called into the principal's office for disciplinary action. A school assembly for public reprimands wouldn't be complete without the two of them. As for why Chen Shingei kept showing up in front of me and clashing with Gu Jingyu, that mystery was finally revealed on the day of my 18th birthday. The coming-of-age ceremony was held at the Fu residence. Grandfather, who adored me, made sure the birthday party was a grand affair. It was filled with prominent figures, most of whom had graciously accepted the invitation. While I was chatting with Uncle Gu, Chen Shingei suddenly raised a champagne glass and called him father. Now, Uncle Gu is Gu Jingyu's father. I maintained a polite smile, but it was hard to keep my eyes from betraying my shock. So he was the illegitimate son the Gu family had brought back. For Uncle Gu to bring him to this prestigious event, I had to admit that Chen Shingei had some skill. He was definitely sharper than Gu Jingyu, who lacked awareness. After making the rounds with my grandfather, I took a moment to rest in the garden. Dealing with those experienced business people who had been immersed in the corporate world for so long was exhausting. If you weren't careful, they'd drag you into their schemes. "Why are you following me?" I heard approaching footsteps behind me, and my tiredness made my tone a bit harsher than I intended. Chen Shingei, showing no sign of apology for disturbing me, instead answered with something completely unrelated, his face full of mischief. "Gu Jingyu and your father, but neither Gu Jingyu nor your father, came to attend your coming-of-age ceremony." And so I replied, already having anticipated this outcome. Since the beginning of the party, it was no surprise that Su Jie would suddenly fall ill, and both Su Xingjian and Gu Jingyu would be too busy tending to her. Let them be. I didn't care either way. Thanks to my grandfather and the influence of the Fu family, the entire event was graced by high-profile guests, whose status easily surpassed theirs. The party lacked nothing in their absence. In fact, I would have found their presence to be an annoyance, polluting the air. "Miss Su, I find you very intriguing. Chen Shengge said, withdrawing his earlier playful tone, this time offering me a champagne glass in a subtle gesture of testing the waters. But I'm not interested in you, I replied, gently moving the glass away with my fingers. Chen Shengge, your schemes don't work on me. Stop trying to involve me in your plans. I didn't care about the Gu family, and I never would. Before, I wasn't sure of his true intentions, but after today, it was crystal clear. If I hadn't figured it out by now, all of my grandfather's years of grooming would have been in vain. Chen Shengge wanted to rope me in to help him seize power. Perhaps even replace Gu Jingyu as my fiancé. His smile became more strained. So, Miss Su, are you just planning to let Sujia and Gu Jingyu off the hook? Even now, he was still trying to stir the pot. But I had no interest in playing along with his game. Rising from the garden seat, the warmth in my eyes turned cold. I'll handle their matters on my own. I don't need allies, I said firmly. So I hope you know your place. And stop provoking me. If you insist on dragging me into your family's power struggle, I can't guarantee I won't bite back. Hearing my warning, Chen Shengge paused for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. Smiling lightly, Miss Su, you must be joking. His interruption left me with no desire to rest anymore. After all, I was the guest of honor at this party, and staying away too long wouldn't look right. I turned and made my way back to the banquet hall. As for Chen Shengge, whether he stayed or left was no longer my concern. After my coming-of-age ceremony, Sujia pretended to be all apologetic, sending me a flurry of messages, apologizing for why father and Gu Jingyu couldn't make it to my ceremony on time. She said I should blame her for it all, as if taking all the responsibility herself. She repeatedly emphasized that it was because of her. What was she trying to prove? With all that self-pity, it would be rude of me not to send a grand gift for her birthday in return. She practically begged for it. As her birthday approached, Sujia made a formal announcement in the class group chat, inviting everyone to her house for a birthday party. She even went so far as to sweetly ask Gu Jingyu in class if he would attend. Of course, Gu Jingyu, who always indulged her, would never refuse. Her words were clearly meant for me to hear. And recently, Gu Jingyu had noticed that I wasn't reacting to their interactions. This only made him more bold in his behavior toward her. In his mind, he must be convinced that I wouldn't dare break off the engagement. After all, to this day, I haven't said a single bad thing about him in front of our families. On the day of Sujia's 18th birthday, I looked at the polished photos she posted on social media, feeling genuinely happy for her. After all, the happier she was now, the more painful it would be when she fell. The next day, I turned on my phone, which I had shut off the night before. A flood of messages and missed calls poured in. From my father, from Gu Jingyu, and even a few cheerful updates from Wu Zhuan. Amidst all the chaos, Wu Zhuan's messages seemed lonely. Easily missed if not for careful attention. I dressed up meticulously and made my way to school. As soon as Wu Zhuan saw me, she rushed over excitedly to share the latest gossip. Yukin, do you know what happened? Yesterday at Sujia's birthday party, a group of tall, burly men suddenly showed up, dressed all in black. She waved her hands for emphasis. Continuing, they said the house Sujia is living in was actually bought by their boss. Everyone at the party got kicked out. You should have seen Sujia's face. It was absolutely priceless. I glanced over at Sujia, who sat at her desk, pale and shaken. It seemed that my gift was a success. Why did you do it? Wu Zhuan asked, a bit surprised. You weren't even mad when your father and Gu Jingyu didn't come to your birthday. If you're upset, take it out on me then, Gu Jingyu said, accusing me. But doing this is a loss of class. The supposed victim hadn't spoken yet, but here was Gu Jingyu, the ever-dedicated protector, pointing fingers at me. Upon hearing his words, Sujia's eyes quickly welled up with tears. Her face filled with sorrow as she looked at me. How do I describe this feeling? It was strangely satisfying. The angrier they became, the more excited I felt. The villa where Su Xingjian and Sujia are living now was a house my mother bought before she got married. Unfortunately for them, my mother left it to me after her passing. All I did was sell it, though I did lower the price a bit, so the beer could move in at just the right moment. It was really just a convenient decision, but even though I did it, I wasn't about to admit it in public. "You shouldn't throw out baseless accusations," I said casually. "I only sold the house. How could I know when the beer would show up to claim it? And how was I supposed to know the Su family was living there?" I responded without even lifting my eyes. It wasn't my fault that Sujia was caught living in a house that no longer belonged to her. Gu Jingyu's face darkened, but he couldn't do anything about it, other than glaring at me with those eyes that couldn't see through Sujia's act. He had no choice but to slink back to comfort her at her seat. I shook my head. I wondered how long he could keep standing by her side so firmly. In the coming days, I couldn't help but notice, little by little, Sujia's jewelry started disappearing. Her once luxurious wardrobe was becoming more and more plain. I knew it the day when Su Xingjian would come looking for me was near. And sure enough, a few days later, as soon as I walked into the house, I saw my father sitting on the sofa. When he saw me, he uncharacteristically put on a kind smile, his face full of warmth as he inquired about my life. "How are things going with your studies lately? The college entrance exam is coming up soon. You need to stay calm and focused." His fake concern was almost laughable. But of course, I played along. "No issues with my studies," I replied. "But there's a bit of a problem with my personal life. Since my father left, I've entrusted all my money to my grandparents for safekeeping. But as you know, father, I've always been a bit of a big spender. Now I'm running low on cash." As soon as I said that, the words he was about to say got stuck in his throat. Having been in a high position for so long, my father's competence may be questionable, but his pride and vanity have certainly grown. Even though he knew I was lying, he couldn't bring himself to ask me for money. The Su family was falling apart, yet he still entertained fantasies of developing new technology and funding research. The company's financial situation was on the brink of collapse. I suspect he had already sold off most of his and Sujia's assets just to barely pay the workers' wages last month. Defeated, Su Xingjian left without achieving anything. But since he couldn't succeed with me, he would naturally turn his attention elsewhere. The next day, I noticed the growing, worrying on Gu Jingyu's face, and there was Sujia, gazing longingly at Gu Jingyu with a face full of melancholy. Their relationship had noticeably shifted, and everyone in class could sense it. In fact, some informed individuals had already begun secretly spreading the news. Gu Jingyu's nature was to prioritize profit. So when it came to matters of interest, love took a back seat. If it weren't for that, he wouldn't have agreed to the arranged marriage with my family, the Fu family, in the first place. Now, with Su Xingjian in trouble, and unable to rely on me, his daughter, naturally, his thoughts turned to his other daughter, Sujia. But what could Sujia possibly do? Her only asset was her relationship with Gu Jingyu. So, day after day, Su Xingjian subtly pressured Sujia to ask Gu Jingyu for money, or convince the Gu family to help the Su family out. In the past, Gu Jingyu might have easily gone along with such a request. But now, with Chen Shengei lurking in the background, watching his every move, Gu Jingyu's father and the entire Gu family were closely monitoring him. At this critical moment, there was no way Gu Jingyu would do something so foolish. Their relationship was like a tightly wound string. On the surface, it still appeared intact. But everyone knew that string could snap at any moment. And as the villainess in this story, I naturally wouldn't miss such an opportunity. I seized the right moment and handed over the photos of Gu Jingyu's intimate moments with Sujia to my grandfather. Grandfather, who doted on me dearly, was furious to see me wronged. Without hesitation, he took those photos in hand, ready to demand justice for me. According to my grandfather, when Gu Jingyu's father saw those photos, he was absolutely furious. His face turned green with anger. However, being a seasoned businessman, He didn't handle things as messily as younger people might. In fact, during their next business negotiation, the Gu family made concessions to the Fu family, taking responsibility for Gu Jingyu's issues by paying a small price. As a result, the engagement was dissolved as I had hoped. Of course, some were happy about it, while others were not. Apparently, Sujia had heard the news from Su Xingjin, because the next day, she was practically glowing. Her gloomy mood from the past days completely gone. As she passed by me, she even pretended to offer comforting words. "Sister, you don't have to be too upset," she said with fake sincerity. "After all, marriage should be something based on mutual feelings. And since you and brother Jingyu had no real emotional connection, it's not such a bad thing that the engagement is called off." I quite agree," I said, this time not bothering to put on a melancholy face, but instead of showing any grief. I lowered my head further when Gu Jingyu entered the classroom, waiting for him to take the bait. "Brother Jingyu," Sujia chirped, joyfully rushing over to him, grabbing his arm, as if their previous tension had vanished. Gu Jingyu, however, with dark circles under his eyes, looked at me for a long time. Seeing that I was no longer the confident person I once was, he tirelessly walked over to my side, and in a low voice asked, "Yukin, why did you arrange for the engagement to be broken off?" I didn't respond, my gaze remaining fixed on Sujia. Everything was said without words. My silence, my demeanor. It all spoke volumes. This gave Gu Jingyu all the hope he needed, almost as if my face was saying, "Break off with Sujia, and we can continue. I don't like her." He suddenly blurted out, "I've only ever seen her as a sister." Gu Jingyu's hesitation had evaporated as he finally voiced his decision. It was clear. This was the result of his sleepless night, weighing his choices. In his mind, power and status were more valuable than love. To him, status was the most important factor. Sujia's smile abruptly froze. The dream of marrying into a wealthy family was crumbling before her eyes. In a panic, she tugged on Gu Jingyu's arm, desperately asking, "Brother Jingyu, what are you talking about? Didn't you say you liked me the most?" I casually glanced at Gu Jingyu several times, and in that moment, he finally understood. He decisively cut ties with Sujia. "How could I possibly like you? I've always seen you as a sister. If you misunderstood because of that, I apologize." Tears began to stream down Sujia's cheeks. She silently shook her head, completely heartbroken. Even I had to mentally applaud the scene. With my goal achieved, I allowed a small smile to creep across my lips. "Don't cry," I said softly. "Relationships should be mutual. You and Jingyu never had a real emotional foundation. It's better to clear things up sooner rather than later." Returning her own words to her, Sujia's tears flowed even harder. Sobbing, she ran out of the classroom. Gu Jingyu stared after her, visibly anxious, but ultimately didn't follow her. As for this misunderstanding, I'll personally go with my father in a few days to explain everything and clear it up. "Our engagement ... can we still salvage it?" Gu Jingyu asked with a hopeful look in his eyes. "When did I ever say," I replied coldly, "that there was still a chance for us to be engaged?" "Gu Jingyu, where do you get that kind of nerve?" I looked at him silently, the pretense of melancholy completely gone. "Su Yukin, whether you're in my life or not, will always be the heiress of the Fu family. What makes you think I'd ever cling to a crook tree like you?" My voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for the entire classroom to hear. Gu Jingyu froze in place, anger visible in his eyes. If looks could kill, I have been dead many times over by now. But eventually, Gu Jingyu did go back to Sujia, trying to reconcile, yet everyone could see the cracks in their relationship. Arguments, frustrations, and compromises slowly chipped away at what little affection remained between them. As expected, both of them underperformed in the college entrance exams. Sujia, who once had top scores, barely managed to get into an ordinary university. As for Su Xingjian's company, it declared bankruptcy during the summer after the exams. Desperate, Su Xingjian came back to the villa, hoping to win my favor, thinking I could help him rise again. His life's struggles made him forget entirely about Suji's feelings. Gu Jingyu didn't fare as badly, but his performance took a noticeable hit. Compared to Chen Shengge, the top scorer in the exams, he paled in comparison. Rumor has it that Gu Jingyu's father, furious with his failure, sent him abroad, but everyone knew it was more than that. Gu Jingyu had been cast aside. When he eventually returned, there would be no place left for him in the story. Years later, after I finished university and started taking over the Fu family business, I looked back and realized how fortunate I was to have been cruel enough back then. Life's script is never fixed. When you're cast as the supporting role, just keep your head up and move forward.